fuck you and your courtroom. My dad will have your job by Monday." Those words, spoken by 23-year-old Brandon Steele to Judge Frank Caprio, get captured by the courtroom camera and viewed by 53 million people worldwide. But what nobody watching knows yet is that Brandon isn't just some spoiled rich kid. He's the reason an 8-year-old boy named Mason will never walk again, never play soccer again, never run on a beach or dance at his prom. And sitting in the back of the courtroom, hidden behind a newspaper, is Brandon's own father, a billionaire who built his empire on the idea of accountability, watching his son destroy everything he stands for. What happens when Judge Caprio finally delivers his judgment, makes grown men cry, and becomes the most shared courtroom video of the decade? Hit subscribe because this is justice at its absolute purest. And drop a comment. Have you ever seen privilege get checked this hard? It's a gray Tuesday morning in Providence Municipal Court, the kind of morning where the November cold seeps through the old building's walls and settles into your bones. The courtroom is packed, standing room only, because word has gotten out. This isn't just another traffic case. This is Brandon Steele, and everyone wants to see what happens when untouchable money meets unmovable justice. Judge Frank Caprio sits at the bench, his reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing the case file in front of him. At 78 years old, Caprio has seen everything this job can throw at him. 38 years on the bench, thousands of cases. He's known for his compassion, for giving people second chances, for seeing the humanity in everyone who walks through his doors. But today, there's something different in his eyes. Something harder. Something that makes the veteran court officers exchange glances. Brandon Steele sits at the defense table in a Navy Tom Ford suit that costs more than most people make in a month. His dark hair is perfectly styled, swept back with product that probably costs $60 an ounce. He's scrolling through his phone, an iPhone 15 Pro Max in platinum titanium, completely unbothered by the proceedings. His lawyer, Martin Chen, one of the most expensive defense attorneys in New England, sits beside him, occasionally leaning over to whisper something that Brandon ignores. 20 feet away, at the edge of the courtroom, sits 8-year-old Mason Torres in an electric wheelchair. He's wearing his favorite Spider-Man hoodie, the one his mom bought him for his birthday last year, back when he could still walk. His legs are covered with a red blanket, hiding the metal braces and the reality that doctors have said will never change. His mother, Elena Torres, sits beside him, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles have gone white. She's 32 years old, but looks 50 today. 6 months of hospital visits and physical therapy appointments and insurance battles and sleepless nights have carved lines into her face that weren't there before. Elena works 2 jobs, morning shift at a diner, evening shift cleaning offices, and she's wearing the same black dress she wore to her own mother's funeral because it's the only formal thing she owns. She keeps looking at Mason, then at Brandon, then back at Mason, like she's trying to understand how these 2 human beings can exist in the same universe. Judge Caprio clears his throat. Case number 2024-CR8847. The State of Rhode Island versus Brandon Michael Steele. Mr. Steele, please stand. Brandon doesn't move. He's typing something on his phone, probably a text to one of his friends about how boring this is, about how much of a joke the whole thing is. Mr. Steele, Martin Chen whispers urgently, tugging his client's sleeve. Brandon sighs dramatically, pockets his phone, and stands with the kind of lazy arrogance that comes from never being told no. He doesn't button his suit jacket. He doesn't straighten his posture. He looks at Judge Caprio like a customer looks at a waiter who's taking too long with the check. Mr. Steele, Judge Caprio begins, his voice measured and calm. You're here today because on April 14th of this year, you were driving your vehicle, a 2024 Range Rover Sport, south on Broad Street when you ran a red light at the intersection of Broad and Public Street, striking a 2011 Honda Civic driven by Mrs. Elena Torres. Her son, Mason Torres, was in the back seat. As a result of the collision, Mason suffered a severed spinal cord at the T12 vertebra. He is now paralyzed from the waist down, permanently. Do you understand why you're here? Brandon shrugs. Actually shrugs, I guess. A gasp ripples through the gallery. Someone in the back row mutters, "Unbelievable," loud enough for the microphones to catch it. Judge Caprio removes his glasses slowly, deliberately. You guess? Your Honor. Martin Chen stands quickly, trying to control the damage. My client is understandably emotional about these proceedings. He looks real emotional, someone from the gallery calls out. Order, Judge Caprio says quietly, but his eyes never leave Brandon. Mr. Steele, this court has reviewed the police report, the accident reconstruction analysis, the hospital records, and the witness statements. According to the crash data recorder in your vehicle, you were traveling at 73 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone. Your phone records show you were actively using Instagram at the time of impact, and your blood test taken at the hospital showed a blood alcohol content of 0.089, which is above the legal limit. Is any of that inaccurate? Brandon shifts his weight from one foot to the other. Look, it was an accident, okay? Accidents happen. I didn't mean to hit anyone. You didn't mean to, Judge Caprio repeats slowly. Mr. Steele, help me understand something. You didn't mean to get behind the wheel drunk? You didn't mean to check your Instagram while driving? You didn't mean to go more than twice the speed limit in a residential area where children play? I had like 2 drinks, Brandon says, his voice dripping with irritation, and I was barely over the limit. My lawyer said that's basically a margin of error. Martin Chen closes his eyes. This is not what they practiced. 2 drinks, Judge Caprio says, and then you got in a 4,000-pound vehicle and drove it like a missile through a neighborhood. Mr. Steele, do you know what Mason Torres was doing before your vehicle struck his mother's car? Brandon stares at him blankly. He was coming home from soccer practice, Judge Caprio continues. He played striker. His coach told investigators that Mason was the most talented 8-year-old he'd ever seen. Colleges were already asking about him. His dream was to play professional soccer. Now his dream is to maybe, possibly, with years of painful physical therapy, be able to transfer himself from his wheelchair to a bed without help. Do you understand the difference between those 2 dreams, Mr. Steele? Yeah, it sucks, Brandon says, and the way he says it, like he's acknowledging that someone's coffee order got messed up, makes Elena Torres let out a sound that's half sob, half gasp. But what nobody in that courtroom knows yet, what the cameras haven't caught, is that in the back row, partially hidden behind a newspaper, sits a man in a charcoal gray suit that costs more than Brandon's. Richard Steele, 56 years old, founder and CEO of Steele Technologies, net worth approximately $4.2 billion, has been sitting there since the doors opened at 8 a.m. He told no one he was coming. Not his lawyers, not his PR team, not his wife, and certainly not his son. Richard Steele built his empire from nothing. His father was a mechanic. His mother cleaned houses. He put himself through MIT on scholarships and student loans, sleeping 4 hours a night, working 3 jobs. He created his first software company in a garage and sold it for $40 million before he was 30. Everything he has, he earned. Everything Brandon has, Brandon was given. And now Richard watches his son, his only child, the boy he's given everything to, the boy he's protected and enabled and excused, stand in front of a judge and show zero remorse for destroying another child's life. Richard's hands are shaking. The newspaper crinkles. Back at the defense table, Martin Chen is trying to salvage this. Your Honor, if I may, my client is a young man with no prior criminal record. Actually, Judge Caprio interrupts, flipping through the file. That's not entirely accurate, is it? The courtroom goes quiet. Mr. Steele has no prior convictions, Judge Caprio clarifies, but he does have quite an interesting history. 3 reckless driving citations, all dismissed. 2 DUI arrests, charges dropped. 1 incident at Brown University involving a physical altercation that was settled privately. It seems Mr. Steele has been very fortunate in avoiding consequences. Brandon's jaw tightens. This isn't how this is supposed to go. His father's lawyers promised him this would be handled. Probation, maybe some community service, definitely no jail time. He's got plans this summer. Ibiza, the Amalfi Coast, his friend's yacht in Croatia. Your Honor, Martin Chen says, his voice taking on an edge, those incidents are not relevant to. They show a pattern, Judge Caprio cuts him off. A pattern of reckless behavior. A pattern of escaping accountability. And now that pattern has resulted in a child being permanently disabled. It was an accident, Brandon suddenly snaps, his composure cracking. I didn't wake up that day planning to hit anyone. It just happened. And honestly, this whole thing is ridiculous. I've got lawyers who are going to appeal whatever you say anyway, so can we just get this over with? I have places to be. The courtroom explodes. People are shouting. One of the court officers steps forward. Elena Torres is crying. Mason looks confused, his 8-year-old brain trying to process why the man who took away his legs is acting like the victim. Everyone calm down. Judge Caprio's voice booms through the courtroom, and the room falls silent immediately. He's not yelling. Judge Caprio never yells, but there's a power in his voice that demands respect. Mr. Steele, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Have you, at any point in the last 6 months, apologized to Mason Torres or his mother? Brandon looks at his lawyer. Martin Chen gives a tiny shake of his head, admitting fault, even apologizing, could affect the civil suit. On advice of counsel, Brandon says, I decline to answer. You decline, Judge Caprio says softly. A child is in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, and you decline to even apologize. Look, Brandon says, and now his true colors are showing. Now the mask is slipping. I feel bad, okay? But my dad's going to pay for whatever medical stuff the kid needs. We're already setting up a settlement, so I don't know what else you want from me. What I want, Judge Caprio says, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, is for you to show one single shred of human decency. Oh, fuck this, Brandon mutters, but the courtroom microphone catches it. This is such bullshit. You know what? Fuck you and your courtroom. My dad will have your job by Monday. The courtroom erupts again. The cameras zoom in on Brandon's face, catching every pixel of his sneer, his entitlement, his complete lack of remorse. Martin Chen looks like he wants to disappear into the floor. The prosecutor, a young woman named Sarah Kim, is staring at Brandon like she's seeing pure evil for the first time in her career. And in the back row, Richard Steele slowly lowers his newspaper. Did he just, someone whispers. He threatened the judge, another voice confirms. Judge Caprio stands. At 78 years old, he's not a large man, maybe 5'7", slight build, but when he stands, he seems to fill the entire room. The anger that flashes across his face lasts only a second before it's replaced by something else, something sadder, something that looks almost like pity. Mr. Steele, Judge Caprio says, I've been doing this job for 38 years. I've been threatened by people far more dangerous than you. I've been yelled at, cursed at, even physically assaulted once. Not one of those people succeeded in intimidating me, and you won't either. What you just did, threatening a sitting judge, is contempt of court, and I could send you to jail right now for 90 days just for that. But before I make any decisions about your sentence, I'd like to hear from some other people. He turns to the prosecutor. Miss Kim, does the state wish to present any victim impact statements? Sarah Kim stands, her hands full of papers, but before she can speak, a voice from the back of the courtroom cuts through the tension. Your Honor, may I speak? Every head turns. Richard Steele is standing, the newspaper folded neatly on the bench beside him. He's walking down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing on the old wooden floor. Brandon's face goes white. Dad? Brandon's voice is suddenly small, suddenly afraid. What are you? Why are you here? Richard Steele doesn't look at his son. He keeps his eyes on Judge Caprio. Your Honor, my name is Richard Steele. I'm this young man's father. May I approach? Judge Caprio studies him for a long moment. You may. Richard walks to the front of the courtroom. He's 56 but looks younger, the kind of aged well that comes from personal trainers and good genes and expensive skincare. But right now, he looks tired. He looks like a man who's been carrying a weight for a very long time and has finally decided to put it down. Your Honor, Richard begins, his voice steady but heavy. I need to tell you something. I need to tell this courtroom something. My son is right about one thing. I am a very wealthy man. I've built a company worth billions. I employ 17,000 people. I have lawyers on retainer whose entire job is to make problems disappear. And for the last 23 years, that's what I've done for Brandon. Every mistake, every incident, every consequence, I made them disappear. I convinced myself I was protecting my son, but what I was really doing was creating a monster. Dad, what the hell? Brandon starts, but Richard holds up a hand. I got a call 6 months ago, Richard continues, from the hospital. They told me my son had been in an accident. They told me he was drunk. They told me he'd hit another car, and they told me a child was hurt. Do you know what my first thought was, Your Honor? Not is everyone okay? Not how badly is the child injured? My first thought was, how much is this going to cost to fix? That's what I've taught my son, that everything has a price, that money can erase responsibility. The courtroom is dead silent. Brandon is staring at his father with a mixture of shock and betrayal. I have a team of investigators, Richard says. I hired them to look into the accident, to find anything we could use in Brandon's defense. You know what they found? They found that this wasn't the first time. 2 years ago, Brandon was driving drunk near our summer house in Cape Cod. He sideswiped a parked car and kept driving. The owner of that car was a 70-year-old woman who was sitting inside it. She had a concussion and 3 broken ribs. I paid her $200,000 to sign an NDA and drop the police report. I have protected my son from the consequences of his actions his entire life, and now an innocent child is paying the price for my failure as a father. Elena Torres is crying silently. Mason is holding her hand, not fully understanding what's happening, but knowing it's important. Brandon finds his voice. You're supposed to protect me. You're my father. I am your father, Richard says, finally looking at his son, and that's why I can't protect you anymore. That's why I'm here to tell this court the truth. That's why I'm asking Judge Caprio, to hold you accountable in a way I never did. Richard turns back to the judge. Your Honor, I know this doesn't fix anything. I know Mason Torres is still in that wheelchair, begging you to give my son what I never gave him. Consequences. Real consequences. Teach him what I failed to teach him. That actions matter. That people matter. That an 8-year-old boy's life is worth more than our family's reputation. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a checkbook. I'm also establishing a trust fund for Mason Torres. $10 million held in escrow to be used for his medical care, his education, his future. It won't give him back his legs, but it's the least we can do. And I'm donating another $5 million to the Providence Children's Hospital Spinal Injury Research Program in Mason's name. The courtroom is absolutely silent. Even Brandon has stopped talking, staring at his father like he's seeing him for the first time. Judge Caprio looks at Richard Steele for a long moment. Mr. Steele, the elder Mr. Steele, what you've done here today takes courage. Real courage. You could have stayed silent. You could have let your lawyers handle this. But you chose accountability over comfort and truth over convenience. That's rare, especially for someone in your position. It's the only thing left I can do for my son, Richard says quietly. Save him from himself before it's too late. Judge Caprio nods slowly, then turns to Elena Torres. Mrs. Torres, would you like to say anything before I deliver my decision? Elena stands shakily. She's clutching Mason's hand so tightly her knuckles are white. When she speaks, her voice cracks. Your Honor, I don't know what to say. 6 months ago, my life was normal. I had a healthy son. We had plans. Soccer tournaments, summer camp, maybe college someday. Now I have hospital bills I'll never pay off. I have a son who wakes up crying because he had a dream he could walk again. I have to help him do things that 8-year-olds should be able to do by themselves. And the person responsible. She looks at Brandon, and her eyes are filled not with hate, but with something worse, disappointment. The person responsible thinks this is an inconvenience. Her voice grows stronger. I'm not a wealthy woman, Your Honor. I can't hire fancy lawyers. I can't make phone calls and make problems disappear. When I make a mistake, I pay for it. When I break something, I fix it. I taught Mason that actions have consequences, that you own up to your mistakes, that you treat people with respect. And now I have to explain to him why the person who took away his legs doesn't have to follow those same rules. She takes a shaky breath. But here's what I want the court to know. Mason is strong. He's braver than any adult I've ever met. Last week, his physical therapist asked him what he wanted to be when he grows up. You know what he said? He said he wants to be a doctor who helps other kids in wheelchairs. My son, who lost everything, wants to help other people. That's who he is. So whatever you decide today, Your Honor, just please make sure that boy over there, she points at Brandon, learns that people like my son matter, that their lives have value, that you can't just buy your way out of destroying someone's future. She sits down, and the silence in the courtroom is deafening. Judge Caprio looks at Mason. Mason, would you like to come up here and talk to me? Mason looks at his mother, who nods. He wheels himself forward, navigating around the tables and chairs with the kind of practiced ease that breaks your heart, because it means he's already gotten used to this being his life. When he reaches the bench, Judge Caprio comes down from his seat and kneels beside the wheelchair so they're at eye level. The cameras zoom in, catching every detail of this moment. "Hi, Mason," Judge Caprio says gently. "How are you doing today?" "Okay, I guess," Mason says. His voice is small but clear. "I heard you like Spider-Man," Judge Caprio says, gesturing to the hoodie. Mason nods. "He's the best. He helps people even when bad stuff happens to him." "That's right," Judge Caprio says. "He's a hero. And you know what? I think you're a hero too. Do you know why?" Mason shakes his head. "Because you're here," Judge Caprio says. "Because you're brave enough to sit in this courtroom and tell your story. Because you're still smiling, even though something really unfair happened to you. That takes courage, Mason. Real courage." "I'm not that brave," Mason says quietly. "I cry a lot at night." "Crying doesn't mean you're not brave," Judge Caprio tells him. "Brave people cry too. They just keep going anyway. And I heard from your mom that you want to be a doctor when you grow up. Is that true?" Mason nods. "I want to help other kids like me, so they don't feel so alone." Judge Caprio's eyes are shining. He places a hand on Mason's shoulder. "You're going to be an amazing doctor, Mason. And you know what? I'm going to make sure you get every chance to make that dream come true. That's a promise." Mason smiles, a real smile, the first one anyone's seen from him all day. Judge Caprio stands and returns to the bench. The whole courtroom is emotional now. People are wiping their eyes. One of the court officers is openly crying. "Okay," Judge Caprio says, and his voice has changed. The warmth is gone, replaced by something cold and final. "Mr. Brandon Steele, please stand." Brandon stands. For the first time all day, he looks genuinely afraid. "Before I deliver your sentence," Judge Caprio says, "I want you to understand something. I've been a judge for 38 years. I've sentenced murderers, thieves, abusers, and frauds. And in all that time, I've tried to balance justice with mercy. I've tried to see the good in people, to give second chances, to believe that people can change. But you, Mr. Steele, have tested that belief in ways I didn't think were possible." He picks up a piece of paper. "You're 23 years old. You have every advantage a person could have: wealth, education, opportunity, health. And you've used those advantages to hurt people, to take and take and take without ever giving back, without ever once considering that your actions might have consequences." "Your Honor," Martin Chen starts. "I'm not finished," Judge Caprio says sharply. "You came into my courtroom today and showed contempt not just for me, but for this entire system of justice. You showed contempt for Mason Torres and his mother. You showed contempt for basic human decency, and you did it all with the assumption that your father's money would protect you. Well, I have news for you, Mr. Steele. Money can't buy you out of this. Not today. Not in my courtroom." He looks down at his notes. The charge is vehicular assault causing serious bodily injury, driving under the influence, reckless driving, and now contempt of court. "Here is my sentence. You are sentenced to 8 years in the Rhode Island Department of Corrections. No early parole eligibility. You will serve every single day of those 8 years. The courtroom gasps. Brandon's face goes white. 8 years? You can't. "I'm not done," Judge Caprio says. "After you complete your prison sentence, you will serve 5 years of probation. During that probation, you will complete 2,000 hours of community service, specifically working with disabled children and veterans. You will attend every single one of Mason Torres' physical therapy sessions that he allows you to attend, and you will see firsthand the consequences of your actions. You will write a personal, handwritten apology to Mason and his mother, and you will write a monthly letter to this court detailing what you've learned." Brandon is shaking his head. "This is insane. Dad, tell him." Richard Steele says nothing. He's watching his son with tears running down his face, but he doesn't intervene. "Additionally," Judge Caprio continues, "you will surrender your driver's license for 15 years. When and if you ever drive again, it will be with the knowledge that one mistake ended a child's dreams. You will undergo mandatory alcohol and substance abuse counseling, and you will be required to give 3 public speeches per year about the dangers of drunk driving. At high schools, at universities, at community centers, you will look young people in the eye and tell them what you did. "This is a life sentence," Brandon shouts. "You're destroying my life." "No," Judge Caprio says quietly. "You destroyed Mason's life. I'm just making sure you understand what that means." He looks at Brandon with something that might be pity. "Mr. Steele, I hope you use these 8 years to become the person your father hoped you would be. I hope you learn that wealth without character is worthless. I hope you learn that every action has a consequence, and that the most important thing a person can do is take responsibility for the harm they've caused. And I hope that one day, when you get out, you become the kind of person who makes the world better instead of worse." He bangs the gavel. This court is adjourned. "Bailiff, take Mr. Steele into custody." The bailiffs approach Brandon, who's now crying. Real tears, finally, tears of fear and anger, and the sudden realization that this is real, this is happening, his life as he knew it is over. They put him in handcuffs, and he looks at his father one last time. "Dad, please," Brandon begs. "Don't let them do this." Richard Steele stands. He walks over to his son. For a moment, it looks like he might say something that will fix this, that will make it all go away like he always has. But instead, he simply says, "I love you, Brandon, and that's why I'm not going to save you this time." Then he turns and walks to Elena Torres. "Mrs. Torres, I know nothing I say can change what happened, but I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. The trust fund for Mason is real. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow, and if there's anything at all, that you or Mason need, you call me directly." He hands her a card with his personal cell phone number. Elena takes it, stares at it, and then looks up at Richard. "Thank you," she whispers, "for telling the truth." Richard nods, and then he turns and walks out of the courtroom, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The cameras capture it all. Brandon being led away in handcuffs, Elena hugging Mason, Judge Caprio sitting at the bench with his head bowed, the empty seat where Richard Steele sat. The video will be uploaded to YouTube within 3 hours. Within 24 hours, it will have 10 million views. Within a week, it will have 53 million. 6 months later, Mason Torres is in physical therapy at Providence Children's Hospital. He's working with parallel bars, trying to strengthen his core muscles. The doctors say he'll never walk again, but they also say that with enough work, he might be able to stand for short periods with the help of braces and a walker. Mason doesn't care about the odds. He shows up every Tuesday and Thursday, working harder than kids twice his age. The trust fund Richard Steele set up has changed his family's life. Elena was able to quit one of her jobs. They moved to a new apartment with wheelchair-accessible features. Mason has the best doctors, the best equipment, the best care. But more than that, he has hope. At the Rhode Island Adult Correctional Institution, Brandon Steele sits in his cell. He shares it with a former Marine named Marcus, who doesn't care about Brandon's last name or his father's money. Marcus treats Brandon like anyone else, which means Brandon has to make his own bed, clean his own space, and follow the same rules as everyone else for the first time in his life. Brandon has lost 40 pounds. Prison food isn't catered by private chefs. His designer clothes have been replaced with a standard-issue jumpsuit. His iPhone has been replaced with monitored phone calls once a week. His Instagram account, which once had 200,000 followers, has been deleted by his family's PR team. But something else has changed too. Brandon started attending the prison's substance abuse meetings. At first, he went because it was mandatory. But then he actually started listening. He heard stories from men who'd lost everything to addiction, who'd hurt people they loved, who were really trying to change. He started seeing his own story in theirs. He's written 47 letters to Mason Torres. The first 46 came back unopened. Elena wasn't ready, and that's her right. But the 47th, written on Mason's 9th birthday, was different. It wasn't about excuses or explanations. It was just, "Happy birthday, Mason. I think about you every single day. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you still want to be a doctor. The world needs more people like you. Brandon. Elena read that one. She didn't respond, but she kept it. Richard Steele stepped down as CEO of Steele Technologies. He's now the chairman of the board and spends most of his time on philanthropy. The Steele Foundation has donated $40 million to spinal injury research. They've funded 3 new research positions at Brown University focused on pediatric spinal cord injuries. They're building a new rehabilitation center in Providence that will provide free services to uninsured patients. Richard visits his son every month. The conversations are hard. Brandon is angry. Richard is grieving the son he thought he was raising. But they're talking. They're honest. They're building something new from the ruins of what was. And Judge Frank Caprio? He's still on the bench, still treating every person who comes before him with dignity and fairness. But that case, that video, changed something. It reminded people that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about accountability. It's about teaching. It's about looking at a young man who's never faced consequences and saying, not anymore, not on my watch. The video has been viewed 53 million times. It's been shown in law schools as an example of restorative justice. It's been discussed on news programs and podcasts. It's been translated into 17 languages. And in the comments, thousands and thousands of comments, people share their own stories. Stories of drunk driving accidents. Stories of children injured by someone else's negligence. Stories of times they saw privilege win and justice lose. But they also share stories of hope, of people who changed, of second chances that worked, of the belief that even the worst mistakes don't have to define us forever if we're willing to do the hard work of becoming better. Mason Torres turned 9 years old in October at his birthday party, attended by his classmates, his physical therapist, his doctors, and Judge Caprio himself. Mason blew out his candles and made a wish. His mom asked him later what he wished for. I wished, Mason said, that the man who hit me learns how to be good. Because if he becomes good, then maybe what happened to me means something. Maybe it helps somebody else. That's the thing about justice, guys. It's not just about making people pay for what they've done. It's about making sure that the pain they caused doesn't spread, that it stops with them, that they become the kind of person who makes the world safer instead of more dangerous. Brandon Steele has 7.5 years left on his sentence. Maybe he'll come out changed. Maybe he won't. But because of Judge Frank Caprio, because of Richard Steele's courage to tell the truth, and because of Mason Torres' unbelievable grace, at least he'll have had the chance. At least someone finally said, enough. At least someone finally held him accountable. And in a world where wealth and privilege so often protect people from the consequences of their actions, that matters. That matters more than you know. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see real justice in action. Drop a comment below telling me, what would you have done if you were Judge Caprio? Would you have been more lenient or more harsh? And tell me, where are you watching from right now? Let's build a community of people who believe that accountability and compassion can coexist, that justice can be both tough and fair, and that even in our darkest moments, there's always a chance for redemption if we're brave enough to face what we've done. Subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep bringing you stories like this, stories that remind us what justice really looks like when it's done right. Stories that give us hope. Stories that prove that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it's expensive, even when it costs us everything, is always worth it. Until next time, guys, take care of each other. And remember, your actions matter. They always matter.